Good evening, everyone, and welcome to Lockdown Literature, courtesy of the Studio Online and the National Lottery Community Fund. You are about to listen to a selection of audio stories gathered together during the COVID-19 lockdown from both the adults and children's write-on sessions. So relax, settle back, and enjoy a selection of writing from some of the finest creative minds at the studio. The Deadly Partner by David Ball.
His gun clicked empty, so I picked up mine and shot him in the face. Not the nicest of ways to end a business relationship, but needs must, especially when that relationship was criminal and your partner in crime had just tried to kill you. I'm a straight dealing kind of guy, and it had always been my intention to stick to our handshake deal. Honour among thieves and all that, and, although I hadn't wanted to see him after we'd split the money, I'd have traded paws with him again before we parted company, like a professional. But then he'd pointed his automatic at me, and I knew the deal had gone south. We'd hooked up about a month ago, right after I was released from San Quentin. His car was parked up next to the sidewalk by the main gate, and he offered me a lift. I don't accept rides from strangers, I said as I started to walk to the bus stop. But he started the engine and kept level beside me as I walked. "Oh, come on, Palmer, don't be like that. You're a straight-up guy. Benny Morris and Joey Diamond highly recommend you. My name's Sam Reynolds," he said, holding onto the steering wheel with his left hand as he held out his right hand for a handshake. I ignored him and carried on towards the bus stop. His name vaguely rang a bell, but I couldn't recall anything about him. In my line of work, you often hear of other people's reputations, even if you never meet them, and it bugged me that his eluded me. But he'd obviously been talking to the right people because he made a point of reeling off another name I'd worked with. So he clearly wasn't a cop. But I was now on patrol, and I didn't want to be seen mixing with a criminal on the day of my release. That would have been really stupid. "Just hear me out, okay?" he continued with his sales pitch. "There's at least $500,000 in it for you if you want in. If not, what have you lost except some of your time? Jump in and I'll buy you a beer and something to eat." That made me stop, and he slammed on the brakes. $500,000? Are you shitting me? Maybe more. It's on the level and it's just waiting to be taken. All I need is a good Peterman and you're the best. Everybody say so. I paused and thought about prison and how much I didn't want to go back now. I'd be stupid to get involved in a job when I'd only just been released. I mean, I hadn't even spoke to my new parole officer, and mixing with felons was the surest way to get yanked back inside. "How do I know this is for real?" I asked. He shrugged. "You don't. Not unless you let me explain." I walked around to the passenger door and got in, because for that kind of money, I was willing to be stupid. "Food first," I said, "then beer. After that you can tell me all about the cash." "It's a front for the mob?" I asked, not quite believing what I just heard. "Are you out of your freaking mind? I'm definitely crazy for agreeing to listen to you in the first place, but I'm not stupid enough to steal from the mafia. Those guys don't give up. They'll look for us for as long as it takes, and when they find us, they'll blowtorch our balls." I took another drink of my beer and asked the waitress to bring me a large bourbon. "Only if they know who we are," he replied. One of the lessons I've learnt over the years as a thief is that disguises don't need to be clever or elaborate. Most people aren't especially observant, and even when they are, memory is a dubious thing. You just need some feature for the Vic to notice, and that's all they'll recall. That and the gun. "You're insane," I said. The bourbon arrived and I drank it down in one go. "You're crazy and you'll get us both killed." "No, I won't. Trust me. Think about it, Palmer. With $500,000, maybe even more, you can go anywhere in the world. They won't know where to look for you, and even if they did, they won't know what you look like." I wouldn't second guess you on how to crack a safe, so trust me on this. I've been doing it for a long time. And that's how I was reeled in. The bar was slowly filling up as the late afternoon clientele, here for solace in cheap booze and anonymity, were replaced by the early evening lot hoping desperately to get laid, and I wasn't sure which was saddest. I ordered another bourbon and thought about the money. I was tired of scrabbling around in the dirt for peanuts, doing little jobs for little reward for little people. In the past, when cash was king and women wore lots of jewellery, safe breaking was lucrative and prestigious and I was in great demand. But with the rise of electronic transactions, the cashless society, who the hell cared about men like me? I was as much a victim as laid off steelworkers and coal miners. I held out my hand. "Shake on it, Sam," I said, "and we've got a deal." He touched the Dixie Rules license plate with the toe of his boot. "I bought the car those plates were on from a junkyard back east," he explained. "I ditched the car and I'd stole this man and transferred them across." I nodded and I waved my hand at the surroundings. "So whose workshop is this and why does it look brand new?" "I signed the lease 2 months ago so I could park the van somewhere safe. Or at least Clyde J. Waller signed the lease, but what's in a name? We're going to be from the south," he continued. "People hear a southern accent and their minds fill in the blanks with all kinds of stuff. By association they remember details which weren't even there." "That's fine with me, Sam, but why does this place look as if it's never been used?" I asked again. "Because it hasn't. The developer went bust before it was finished and nobody else was interested. We're the only tenants." "I see, Sam," I said. "Before we leave though, I really need to take a leak. Where's the John?" He told me, and I went, but as is so often the case with directions, I got a bit lost. Opening a storage cupboard by mistake, I saw 2 unopened cans of gasoline, a jackhammer and some ready-mixed concrete. Hell, I thought, the builders were really keen to abandon the project, leaving stuff like this behind. Fortunately though, I did manage to find the men's room in time. We parked the van outside and walked into the store. Sam took his gun out and waved at the lady behind the counter while I put the close sign up, locked the door and drew the blinds. "My dear," he said in a soft but impeccable southern accent, "I'd greatly appreciate it if you could put your hands up and kindly walk out from behind the counter." "There ain't much cash in the register," she said, voice quivering slightly, "but take it all and please don't hurt me." "We're not interested in your register, ma'am, just the walk-in safe out back." "Ah, I see," she said, seeming to stand up straighter. Her voice appeared to change as well. "In that case, boys, I'd leave right now if I were you. At least then you'll have a small chance of living. Because if you don't, you're both as good as dead. This is a huge mistake you're making because you really don't know who you're messing with." "Don't you pay no mind to that, ma'am," Sam smiled. He nodded to me and I used tape to tie her hands behind her to cover her mouth. She stared daggers at Sam. Then I taped up her ankles before pulling her into a room filled with all sorts of rubbish. Once that was done, we found the safe and I got to work opening it. A fine example of a late 60s Schwab. It didn't take long for it to succumb to my fingers, and when I opened the door, I felt the same thrill that I did each and every time I did this. Sheer magic. We started transferring the bricks of money into canvas bags, which we then put on a trolley. All of the notes were thousands, so there was a tidy sum there, and after a while Sam tapped me on the shoulder. "Looks like I was wrong," he said, as he held up one of the bricks for me to see. "I've been adding them up. I reckon there's at least 5 million here." The smile on his face was the pure joy of a child on Christmas morning. I paused before stating the obvious. "Yeah? Well, let's hope we stay alive long enough to spend it all." We emptied the Schwab in short order, and then Sam brought the van round into the alleyway that ran parallel to the back of the row of businesses the store was part of. The height of the door at the back pretty much matched the van's, so we just pushed the trolley on board. That done, we did a quick clean of surfaces we might have touched, and then hit the road. I needed to pee fit to bursting by the time we got back to the workshop, so while Sam opened up the main door and drove the van in, I went through the office door to visit the job. Then I remembered something. A memory which had hitherto remained submerged. Not just elusive in the sense that I knew it was there but couldn't quite access it. No, this had been in the basement of my mind, but now had sprung fully remembered to the top floor. Something a former cellmate, Dave Rubio, had said to me a few years ago. I walked back into the main part of the building. Sam smiled, and I thought I might have made a rash mistake. Perhaps the relief of having completed the job had released pent-up tension and adrenaline. But then he pointed his automatic at me, and I knew I was right. Is the gasoline and the cement for me, Sam? Yeah, I'm afraid so. You'll be staying here. I always was a greedy son of a bitch, and I want to keep all of it. See, that's what Dave Rubio had told me. He'd been on a job with a dude called Sam Reynolds, but the guy had creeped him out. I'd had the strangest feeling that I was being used, he'd said, that I was expendable and that he didn't really see me as his partner. David walked away from the job and hadn't regretted it. You just gotta be able to trust the guys you're working with, Steve, he'd warned. In a sudden flash of inspiration, or maybe madness, I did what parents do with young kids. I play acted. Turning my head towards the main door behind Sam, I said, "Officer, thank God you're here. He's going to kill me." And he fell for it. He looked. I'm not sure I'd expected him to, but he did. And in that moment, I seized the chance of life and ran back into the office part of the workshop. He fired 4 shots at me, which thankfully missed, though 2 splintered the woodwork near my head. As I moved through the offices, I took the snub-nosed revolver out of the holster on my waist. I'd got it from a friend of a friend because I'd still been jittery about stealing from the mob, but I hadn't mentioned it to my former partner. Wise decision. His automatic boomed in the confines of the corridor behind me, and the bullet spun me round as it entered my left shoulder. A supernova of pure white, star-bright pain exploded, and as much by instinct as choice, I fired back at him. His face was a picture, though, as he clearly hadn't suspected that I had a gun of my own. There was a set of stairs leading up to somewhere, anywhere, so in mounting panic I went up them. My shoulder was agony, but it meant I was still alive, so when I heard him at the foot of the stairs, I fired again. He fired twice more, so did I. I'd never carried a gun, didn't know how to shoot properly, and I'd already used more than half of my bullets. My other mistake was coming up here. It was pretty much one big, empty room with nothing to hide behind. I moved further in. It was no good. Stopping, I turned around and there he was. He shot me twice. I dropped my revolver and sank to my knees as he walked over to me. "Palmer, what on earth was that all about?" he asked, putting the gun to my forehead. "You've been watching way too many movies." His gun clicked empty, so I picked mine up and shot him in the face. He fell backwards, and moments later I keeled over sideways. I passed out, but for how long I don't know. When I came to, the pain in my stomach was as bad as my shoulder, and I vomited. I felt lightheaded, which I guessed was through the shock and blood loss, but I still had enough presence of mind to dial 911 on my cell phone. I knew if I could only just hold on till help came, I might be okay. Then I passed out again.